Friends, hello, how are you? Um, I wanted to chat a little bit about my experience at the Reader Studio this year. I already did a little chat about my loot, the stuff I took away physically, but there are other things I took away that were not products that were equally as valuable. And I mentioned in that video that I wanted to talk about it, but I also wanted to take a little time to figure out how to talk about it so that I wasn't stealing essentially anyone's work, because the presenters were amazing, and of course what they presented is their intellectual property, and everyone who went to the Reader's Studio, of course, paid for the experience of that, and so it's not cool, I don't think, for me to come on and give it away, but I also wanted to share what I took away. So, I've had some time to unpack the experience, and so I'm ready to chat about it. So there's a handful of things I want to talk about each of the presenters, and I want to talk about my own individual experience. And I think in a weird way this is kind of a commercial for the experience for anyone who's like me. So I guess where I'll start is by talking a little bit about some of my quirks. They're not. I mean, I use that word casually. They're just parts of my personality, and I think many people have similar experiences, which is that I don't really thrive in the environment of conferences. I am. I actually tend to wilt a little bit in that I'm not a social butterfly. While I love people, and I'm especially fond of socializing with people in small groups, I do not handle large crowds well, even if we're all sort of on the same page and there for the same thing. And in fact, I think I've talked about this before. I was registered for the Reader Studio last year and paid up and ready to go, and then a couple things happened financially, but I could have dipped into my savings and went anyway, but I decided to kind of chicken out and not go, and use that as an excuse to not go. And it may have been the right thing. But this year I did it again, and April came around and started to feel a financial pinch and said, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go. And I got on the train and got to New York, and then got in a lift and got to the hotel and immediately thought, what am I doing? I don't want to do this. I don't belong here. So there's that is like the introvert thing, and I think what's nice about the introvert thing is that so many people there are introverts. It's a very introvert rich environment. So the nice thing is that people don't pressure you. In my experience, no one's sort of pushing you to do things that you're not, you don't have the energy for. People understand it, and in fact, you're encouraged not to do everything because it's tough, and it's a really interesting experience. I would say I work in corporate training, so I've had the experience of being at big conferences and leading them and presenting at them, and never honestly have felt as exhausted after one day as I did at the Reader Studio. So I did not go to the Tarot and Psychology conference on Thursday. So I started with everyone on Friday morning, and I went to the Friday morning beginning session and Mary Kay Greer's masterclass. And I think all told, we sort of wound up, or wound down for the day. I don't know, maybe like 4:30, 5 o'clock. I was in bed by 8 o'clock, and I was sound asleep by 8:30. So they're not kidding when they tell you that it's exhausting, and I think that, and I don't mean exhausting. It's not. You don't feel like you're being drained, but when you're done, you realize, oh God. And I think it's because there's a huge amount of energy in the room, and people are putting out a lot of emotion and a lot of way. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. There's just, I think, is a lot of chemistry at work. So, but again, nobody was like pushing you to do things. So the introversion thing was like cared for, and I did not feel guilty. Although I do wish there were a couple things I wished I had gone to for in terms of study groups and the incubators that they do. But again, I feel sort of confident that I made the right choice in going to sleep as early as I did. So the other thing that happens, and another reason why I never want to go to these things, is that on a daily basis, I look at my practice and I look at my videos and the work that I do and the readings I've done for people, and I feel relatively confident in my ability. I would never say that I'm the best at anything, but I have, again, almost 20 years now. I'm on the edge of 40, and I started when I was 19, of reading, some years more than others. But I've done a lot of practice and I've invested a lot of effort and time into doing what I do. And on a daily basis, I feel relatively sure of myself, most of the time. And when I read for people, the feedback I get is almost always, and this, I'm not, this isn't meant to be a humble brag. Part of the discussion is about the balance between insecurity and security. So on a regular basis, I would say I feel fairly secure. And I don't have a huge tarot practice, but I have some clients who've been really loyal. I have some folks I've worked with as a coach, and I'm left from those experiences feeling by and large that I'm skilled. And it's hard, I think one of the things in life is that, especially if you're going to do something like this, it's important that you be able to say that out loud sometimes. But put in a position of approaching the reader studio where it's sort of a cavalcade of people I've admired and who are well known and have incredible experience, I immediately start to think, well, I'm not there. I'm not them. I'm not Mary Kay Greer or Rachel Pollack or Benabel Wen, but also I'm not Ethne, and I'm not Arwen, and I'm not, Angela Nazi. I'm not any of those people. I'm just me. I'm just, who I am, and I'm not as good as. So I start to let my self-confidence kind of drain. And the first thing that happens at the reader studio is that or the first sort of tarot-related thing is you pair up with someone and you do what's called a foundation reading, and you essentially just do, a straight-up reading for someone. And so I did, and I laid out the cards, and I just had that horrible moment of letting doubt sort of erupt around me. And I don't know that I showed it happily, but I do know that I sort of felt validated in my insecurity, and I couldn't wait for it to be over. And that's, it's also a thing. It's one reason why I'm not a big fan of reading for people face to face, which I'll admit is probably something I should focus on as I head into the next phase of my reading life, because it's not my favorite thing to do. I like to have time to digest and experience the cards and articulate. If you've ever watched any of my video, I'm constantly criticized for my umming and ahhing and, my sputtering and stuttering, because my brain and my mouth are not always as connected as I want them to be. And it takes me a while for what's brewing up here to make sense out here. And so one of the reasons why I love written readings and prefer video readings for people is that it gives me that time to do that. Face-to-face readings, I don't feel quite as tranquil in that experience. So, but, that's a flaw. It's a flaw in humanity, right? It's not exclusive to me. But I do have to remind myself from time to time, and often the times where I need it the most are the times where I forget it, that I do have this experience behind me. And it's not about being impressive or anything. It's just about giving your skill and experience and opening that up to someone else in the hope of helping them. So, but that was another sort of sticking point for me that made my experience less desirable. And again, nobody made me feel that way. But I did, you know what I mean? And at the end of the weekend, you revisit that. And I revisited the reading, and with distance and time to internalize, I was able to look at the cards again from a completely clean standpoint and say, oh, here's what I see now. And that was a nice feeling. So hopefully the person I read for did not feel that I was sweating it as much as I was. So those were sort of the two difficulties in approaching, was the sudden lack of confidence and my generalized introversion and social anxiety. But it's nice to be around people who are equally anxious, socially anxious, and equally introverted. And in fact, we had a lot of great conversations at the various tables I sat at about that. And it's just, it's rare actually that you get the opportunity as a bunch of fairly introverted people to laugh about it together, and we did. So that was sort of the down part for me, but the up, and again that insecurity kind of lingered all weekend. At times I wasn't expecting it, and it's all part of the journey, right? So it's something I'm aware of, and will talk to my therapist about, and who knows, I may do some readings about it. So the highlights though were the presentations I'm going to get to, but the people are great, and I walked into the ballroom on the first day, and Arwen came running up to me, and she said, "I know you. Come sit at my table," which is, I mean, it's maybe such a small thing to most people, but it was the best thing anybody could have done for me at that point, because it was like it took all the stress of like that feeling of being the new kid in school at lunchtime looking for a place to sit. So I got to sit with and just also chat with Arwen the whole first day, which again was super cool because I followed her work. I mean, I feel like I remember her name back when I was reading for the American Tarot Association. I feel like I remember, and I may just be making this up, but I feel like I remember her writing for the newsletter, and I feel like she was a mentor for the Free Tarot Networks at one point. So I feel like I've known her name as forever. So it was awesome to chat, and she's a hoot, and she's again a very generous. So I mean, anyone who calls themselves a professional joy seeker, right? Like that's an incredibly generous thing. So the festival, the Reader Studio started for me with that kind of amazing act of generosity, again, which sort of was lovely and totally necessary for someone like me. So that was great. And I mean, I almost hesitate to mention names because I know that I'm going to leave people out who, I feel like I shouldn't. Sorry, I'm just trying to check on something real quick. Just stare at my gorgeous backdrop for a second. So unprofessional. Anyway, sorry about that. So that was how it started, and I got to just meet people I admired and watched for so long. Ethany, for example, Arwen, Angela Nazios, again, I can't mention everyone because I will totally forget people. Liz Westwater, who's also sort of a local near me, and we really bonded. We've known each other on Instagram, but to like connect face to face was so much fun. And I ended up giving copies of my book to people because I brought some to sell, but there's another thing I can't do, which is like sell it. I just want to give it to people as a way of saying like thank you for being awesome. Here's this little thing of me that I can offer. So that was great. The people were amazing. I mean, I had so many fun conversations with people, and and people really were very, very genuinely interested in connecting. And I think, if I go again, and I am registered for next year, I will probably feel a little bit more comfortable. And in fact, one thing that I find is that when I am in the position of being able to bring someone new, like that makes me feel a little more comfortable myself. So people were amazing. Everyone I chatted with, was really incredibly lovely, and I mean, without exception. So you really can't ask for a lovelier group of people, and that's one thing I'll say by and large about this community. With some, and there's sort of monsters lurking in every closet, but in our community here, online, at the Reader Studio, I mean, I feel like doing what we do requires a level of empathy and to do it well, and I think that comes through in the interactions that I've had with folks. So this was no exception to that. And, just thanks to everyone that I chatted with at all, who, was totally lovely and kind and just a joy to speak with. Because it definitely, put me at ease. And hopefully, I managed to help someone else feel at ease at some point, if for no other way than just sort of being so open about my insecurities. So on to the presenters, which were amazing, and what I decided I would do is give each, like, just a brief description of each presentation, and then sort of tell you one of the key takeaways for me. And in the days after unpacking all that knowledge, sort of what's living in my learning right now. And so the first presentation was by Mary Kate Greer. I mean, come on. This was the conference to go to. This was the reader studio to go to. Mary Kate Greer and Rachel Pollack, are tarot mothers for us. I mean, they gave us modern tarot in the United States. They gave us that. So to have the experience of listening to both of them speak, and to see them both as humans, who are generous and thoughtful and have so much to say, was amazing. So Mary Kate Greer did a technique, not unlike the Reader's Studio, the Tarot School's voice in the card technique, around the idea of identifying a symbol in the card and using that as a theme for the reading, for exploring. And there was a lot of brilliant things she did. You can tell that she's an educator, because what she did was put you into the world of what she was trying to get you to practice. So she gave you the lesson, and then the opportunity to go in and experience what she was teaching you. And then you would partner with someone and share with each other and get their thoughts for part. And then you would do another piece, and then you would partner with the person next to you. And it's a very smart training technique, because you're getting not only the lesson and practice, you're also getting feedback. And it really did lead to kind of a brilliant reading for me and for myself. We were reading for ourselves. And what I took away from that principally was the power, again, of a symbol in a card, of a moment or an image. I talk about this from time to time. I'm not a very visual person. I'm a writer. I deal in words, and I'm very swordsy. I'm very cerebral. Pictures, I've said in the past, often get in the way, especially if it's a very literal, representational situation on a card. And so one of the joys for me of discovering pip decks and how fun it was to read with those was being able to let go of that. But this brought me back into it a little bit in a different way, and it sort of was less to me about the whole painting and more about like a distillation or an abstraction of it. And that's really been nice, because as I've come back, it's brought me into a couple decks that I never used before, because they're not pip decks. They don't have sort of that Marseille representation of wands, or coins, but they're also not Rider-Waite-Smith, what I call situational or representational pips. And it's just been a nice new world to settle into this week. And it's letting me connect with some decks that are actually really powerful and that I haven't had the opportunity to use before, but that up until this point hadn't sung to me. So that was a real great moment. It was a real great lesson. And again, it may not sound like a lot to say it this way, but it was awesome. And again, I'm trying not to reveal so much. So that was the first day. The second day, Rachel Pollack actually presented last, but she's been an idol of mine, and I never even really had the opportunity or the bravery to tell her that as I was there, or to chat with her. I did get to tell Mary Kate Greer how great she was. And she had this amazing conversation with us, and I think there's something, what's so powerful about that is, I don't know if it's just me. I do feel like there's a cultural thing where and certainly I fall victim to this, where we tend to get starstruck. We tend to celebritize people who've had a certain amount of success, which to a degree is kind of warranted. And we, we love looking up to people, and I certainly can be very starstruck. But the way that she handled her conversation, and I call it that because it really was she started with a list of questions, and she just sort of essentially facilitated a conversation with us about those questions, and told us stories from her experience and connection to it. And the other thing that, well, there were a couple things that were kind of great. One is that you get a sense of how much experience she has because of the amazing stories she tells. But the other thing that was cool for me was, if you read my book or if you've watched any of my videos in the last couple of years, I talk a little bit about how I essentially now will read for any question I get. I do accept health and legal things there because, again, just mostly I don't believe people who are coming for a reading about health can hear one way or another what I have to say. But that's, again, maybe me projecting. And legal is just legal, right? I don't want to get sued. But she talked about how she had the experience of being very, I don't want to say rigid, and I can't even remember the story necessarily, but she was very principled, I think is the word she chose, about not doing third-party readings and things like that, and how I think she said she's gotten less principled over time, which made me laugh, because I have too. So it was a nice validation from one of my great, teachers, because of course I read her books voraciously, to hear that, she's kind of reached the same conclusion that I have. That was sort of fun. And just to, again, watch a person and listen to a person who's so smart and knowledgeable about not just tarot, but tarot history and art and literature and myth. I would say that she's sort of the Joseph Campbell of the tarot world, or in, along with Robert and Place. They're both very much in that world. And so that was brilliant and just so great to hear her experience come to life, and to not stand in front of the room and say, I know all of this stuff because I'm Rachel Pollack, but let's dialogue about this stuff because it's interesting to me and it's interesting to you. So let's talk. That was great. And then Benabel Wen's presentation was, and I really, really hope she makes a book out of this or a course or something, because it's really kind of stunningly brilliant. Dealt with the connection between DNA and essentially inherited memory from ancestors and past lives. And she created two very sort of astonishing spreads that I haven't even had time to unpack and really sit with, about connecting to that ancestral imprint on your DNA and how it's affecting you today, and also a past life imprint on your DNA. And just to give you a sense of where she was going, without, I hope, revealing too much, she began by talking a lot about genetics and inherited traits, and she talked about how there's some evidence in science today that the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors have inherited trauma, essentially. And she took that and ran with it and created sort of a brilliant series of spreads around connecting with those things that are probably imprinted in our DNA from other lives and those who came before us. So it was, it was just breathtakingly smart. And she's got my favorite sort of sense of humor, because she's sort of she has a jellyfish sense of humor, which is, she sneaks the joke in there and you only realize afterwards that it's stung you, not in a bad way. She's just really funny, but also really self-effacing, which I appreciate, and smart as hell. And I just adored the presentation. I loved her book. This was so specialized, though, that it made me just over the moon. And I don't know that anyone will ever do anything with tarot as kind of brilliant as that. So I hope she really takes it further. So those were my real takeaways from the presentations, and they were really, really, really great. And at the end of each, I felt really, really exhausted. And so, you have a day on Saturday. You've got Benawell Len in the morning, and then dinner. I'm sorry, lunch break, and then Rachel Pollack in the early evening, and then a banquet. And one of the regrets I have is that I didn't stay for the talent show because apparently there was some talent out there. And then on Sunday, you wrap up and you revisit that reading, as I said, and you make a mad scramble to the vendors you didn't get to visit, and you spend money on things. And I made, I think, the very wise decision of actually staying over Sunday night, so that I had time to go to bed early and not have to run to the train to get home. It's not I'm only about 3 hours from New York by train, and not on the express, on the regional. So it's not a long ride, but I just feel like it was the right thing to do, to be able to go back to my room and sort of decompress, and then get up the next morning and go home. And I ran into a bunch of folks in the bar that night. I was going down to get some food and have a drink. And we had this little moment where I sat with them, and then the group started to break into smaller groups. And I said, I'm going to go sit at the bar and do some work. And I did. And again, there was no sort of, at least I hope there wasn't, any sort of reaction of, oh, that guy's a snob, he doesn't want to sit with us. It was like, oh, yeah, I totally get it. Go do that. So, it's an impressive thing to spend 3 days with people who are generous and lovely and smart and talented. I mean, the art. I just can't even get over the art. So, I mean, just amazing. So it was a really, really good experience. And on Sunday night, I thought this was a good experience, and I don't think I'll go next year. And I did a reading about it, and the reading actually seemed to suggest that there's potentially something that's going to get in the way of my going, that there's going to be a conflict, and I may already know what that is, because I'm finishing my master's degree in this year and next, and it's a potential I may have to go to my graduation if I finish my thesis on schedule. So we'll see about that. But I did then the next day say, gosh, what if it sells out and I can't go and I want to go? So I registered for next year, and I am looking forward to it. And the presenters next year include Ethany and George Corey, and there's going to be a divination day instead of the psychology conference, which I think includes Rena George doing a Lenormand workshop. And she said she's going to be doing something she's never done with Lenormand before, so that'll be interesting. And I think there's going to be something around scrying or crystal. Honestly, I was so tired by that time, and there's a third presenter who I really wish now I had gone to the website and looked, because I can't remember the name, which is embarrassing. But the presenters are going to be lovely again, and the people are great. So I did register for next year. So I thought it was a wonderful experience, and I really did take away a lot from it. And I also started to take away just the realization that I need to do some work around my channel and branding and sort of cleaning that up. I've got my Etsy shop, which is Curious Journey Tarot, which I always liked the name of, but it's sort of not on brand anymore. At the time I started reading, I was definitely thinking in terms of reading for folks who were afraid of having readings. And as time has gone on, I've gone in a little bit of a different direction. So I need to sort of look at my Etsy shop and my website and my social media. So I need to sort of clean up that. I think Tom Benjamin needs to be where I sort of post on social media about tarot. Certainly my Instagram, which is mostly tarot and divination at this point, but it's under my real name. But my book is under my reader name, and I just think there should be a nice, clean, recognizable quality there. So I need to do some work around that. And that was sort of something that I kept sort of coming to again and again. Also because I was there as Ben and not as Tom Benjamin. And so a lot of people didn't know. A couple people recognized me, but a lot of people, when I gave them my card, were like, oh. And someone asked me if I had read my book, and that was fun. It made me laugh because I was like, oh yeah, I wrote that. So, it's and I had the opportunity to use Tom Benjamin, but again, it's so weird because that's not my name. It's just my name here. And it hasn't really been much of an issue, but I think in terms of just making a consistent brand, I think that needs. So that was the thing I took away too. I also took away the Japaritza tarot, which was really an interesting thing, and I talked about that in my loop video. But that was special, and that's a deck that I'm really working with a lot this month and finding kind of amazing. So there was a lot of amazing overall, and it was a good experience. And now that I'm able to unpack both literally and figuratively, I it's nice to be able to sort of say, oh, here's what I've learned. Here's where I need to sort of focus some energy around my tarot practice. I also had some interesting conversations about my career, um, in terms of readings that were done, and also my brand. So anyway, this is sort of twice as long as I imagined it was going to be, but hopefully it was interesting. Hopefully, maybe this was a good enough commercial for the Reader Studio that you'll want to go and register. I'm pretty sure registration is open now, so you can go to the website, or I think their Facebook group. But thank you again. I know I purposely didn't mention everyone because I didn't want to leave anyone out who had impacted me. But thank you to everyone who I came into contact with, because everyone had an impact, and even people that just chatting online within the Facebook group afterwards have continued to have an impact. So really wonderful, and I really am looking forward to going again, if not next year, then the year after. But I do really think this is a special event, and I'm happy to have been. So those are my thoughts and my musings, and hopefully they were interesting. In part, I made this so that a year from now I can go back and remember, what the experience was like, because it's so amazing how quickly you forget this stuff. So, but have a good weekend. Stay cool, because it's hot as hell now, and be good.